The key is US-China relations. Taiwan is only separate because of America. And for America, Taiwan is just a piece on the chessboard. We ask ourselves, the relative power of China and the US 10 years ago, of China and the US today, of China and the US 10 years from now, 20 years from now. There was a time when US GIs were in the streets of Taipei, not that long ago. The US will not be able to maintain the same relative position. And as China goes stronger, that final chapter will have to close.
Words of wisdom from Mr. George Yeo, former Minister for Foreign Affairs of Singapore. He has his own unique ideas on how to solve China-Taiwan conflicts peacefully. After listening to this speech, you will ponder about what he said and the solution he had suggested. Trust me, this will totally change your perspective against the issue.
Lee Kuan Yew once said, between China and Taiwan, we say Qianli. It's like a long journey. The Americans do not want the two to ever come together, to continue on parallel paths forever. That would be the American preferred position, because then Taiwan will never be an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the mainland. Then Taiwan is an additional piece they can use in a great game. That is American position. But when the mainland became a problem, a challenge to America, the Korean War, the Seventh Fleet came in. It was in American interest to keep the two apart. Kissinger, when he negotiated normalization of relations with China, in his meetings with Zhou Enlai and Mao Zedong, said, again and again, the conversation came back to Taiwan. That on this issue, the Chinese showed no flexibility. It's bedrock. It is not a card which America can play against China because it would lead to a rupture and maybe even to war. And in recent years, relations have become quite bad. Both sides think of war scenarios. What happens if there's war? What will each side do? If China were to forcibly take over Taiwan, what would the US do? These are scenarios which the Indo-Pacific Command, as a matter of professionalism, have to think through and exercise. RAND has also done such exercises. I think the US have come to the conclusion that if it's a conventional war, there is no certainty of winning. In fact, there's a good chance that they may lose. Because China now has hypersonic missiles, which can travel maybe 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers to hit US aircraft carriers, which means that aircraft carriers have to stay away and cannot intervene in Taiwan. So for the Americans, if they want to deter China, they must be able to threaten China with nuclear weapons, tactical, and maybe up the scale if necessary. And you can be sure that on both sides, in dark rooms, there are strategic thinkers who work through the scenarios. China knows that the US wants to deny it a counter-strike capability. They put the missiles now on high-speed train. It's about the same length. And China has lots of tunnels, so they can hide the missiles in the tunnels. But today with satellites, you can monitor every railroad, every fast train, the entrance and the exit to every tunnel. So China is not sure that its land-based ICBMs can hit back. So they know they need submarines. And the only sea which is deep enough is the South China Sea. And in ASEAN, we don't want to get involved in this. We have our claims, we have our economic interests, but we are not involved in nuclear warfare. And the reason for AUKUS is to add maybe another 8 Australian attack submarines so that every strategic submarine in the PLA Navy can be tracked and hunted down. Now, this is, to me, madness, you know. They are thinking of the possibility of a nuclear exchange. But when I was in the military, this is my job. I got to think through all this. So China knows that it must have an assured counter-strike capability because the US wants to deny China a counter-strike capability. So from a few hundred warheads, it's going to increase it to maybe 1,000 to 2,000, I don't know. And we read that in Xinjiang, They're building many silos. So maybe for every ICBM, they may have 2 empty silos, like an MX game, so that it's hard for the Americans to destroy everything in the first try. Now, if I were Taiwanese, think about this. In 10 years' time, China will have almost a certain counter-strike capability against the US. So at a conventional level, they may not prevail. At the nuclear level, the risks are too high. At that point, the pressure on Taiwan, political, military, economic pressure, is bound to grow. So therefore, the status quo is a ticking bomb. To say, keep the status quo, is to say, let it tick. It will not tick forever. In 10 years' time, you'll be ticking much faster. Lee Kuan Yew had always taken the position that it is better for Taiwan to negotiate with the mainland earlier rather than later. Because the longer you wait, the weaker your relative negotiating position. But of course, there are Taiwanese who believe that maybe if you wait long enough, something will happen to the mainland. Some big struggle in the Communist Party, a new civil war, and then a path for Taiwan to escape and become independent. Now, Lee Teng-hui said, take Taiwan out from Egypt. Well, maybe one day the Red Sea will open. But you cannot base policy on such a possibility. It's too dangerous. It may happen, but it's not a high chance. And policy cannot be based on that. So, for me, watching this, with some emotion, but not with the emotion of a Taiwanese, I say, no, better to negotiate now. Which is why we had the 九二共识, which was why we had the free trade agreement under President Ma. And there's this view that President Xi Jinping can't wait to invade Taiwan for his legacy. This, to me, is not consistent with what he did in 2015. When in Singapore, President Xi met President Ma over dinner at the Shangri-La. At that time, I was with the Kwok group. So I asked one of the Kwoks, I said, who paid for the bill? She told me 50-50, down to the last cent. I remember President Ma brought Jingmen Gaoliang, and President Xi, of course, brought the Guizhou Mao Tai. No? I think both are equally good, equally strong. And the words spoken that evening was so moving. I mean, I'm not from Taiwan, not from mainland, but I'm ethnic Chinese. And I was really moved by those words. And I remember talking to Robert Kwok about it. He too was moved by those words and moved by the symbolism of that meeting, where both sides transcended politics. They addressed each other as Seng Sheng. Not Mr. Mr. is the low-level way of addressing. Seng Sheng is the highest level of addressing each other. In other words, the key is to go up, not to go down. But at that time, President Mao was already stepping down. And everyone knew that it was likely that Tsai Ing-wen would become president. With Vice President Winston Hsu's help, I called on Tsai Ing-wen after she was elected, before she was sworn in. She said that China did not have a positive attitude. I told her, I said, in Singapore, Xi Jinping had opened the road for you. She did not respond to me, but she knew what I meant. But I knew that she could not take that road, because that road requires her to accept a one China consensus. And she could not take it. In the DPP constitution, it says, our goal is an independent republic of Taiwan. Even though both Chen Shui-bian and Tsai Ing-wen swore on the Mingguo Xianfa of one China. So this is something which is very wrenching for green Taiwanese. They know that there is a road. But that road means that there could be a trap. Because one China may mean one PRC, equal 两制. So they say no. The alternative is a dead end and tragedy, not just for Taiwan and the mainland, but I think for Singapore and for the entire region, for the world, if there's war between China and the US. This road is not a superhighway, but it's not a bad road. And one China, the PRC did not say one PRC policy, it says one China. It did not say when. It says 什么都可以谈. You can discuss everything. So when Tu Lilun, whom I had dinner with last night, he was in America. He said there's no consensus on the one China consensus, on the 九二共识. He said, I was just using the words of Hu Zhenfu. Ambiguity is a key to the future. I mean, in Tai Chi, I do Tai Chi for 15 years. Tao Te Ching, the second line, 名可名,非常名. If you define it too much, it disappears. So ambiguity is necessary. The mainland will accept some ambiguity. Taiwan should accept some ambiguity. The problem is the DPP constitution. Please excuse me if I speak out of turn, but this is my musing, my fantasizing. Maybe it is possible for the two sides to agree to some kind of a Chinese Commonwealth. Li Xiulin talked about it, Vice President Li Xiulin talked about it. I wrote it in English, so I was told in Taiwan, translated as Bang Lian, not Lian Ban. Because Lian Ban has got other connotations, there are too many other references. There are precedents. In Iceland, the Icelandic people met every year in the Rift Valley. They make laws. They talk about trade disputes. They pass judgments. They punish. Then they went back to their separate valleys. There was no executive, no common executive. It was called the Altingi. It was Europe's earliest modern democracy. Then if you study Switzerland, the cantons came together to form the Helvetian Confederation. Again, they had no executive, but they met to discuss common problems. So when we talk about one China, maybe we can talk about a one China Commonwealth where the two sides talk about trade, cooperation, problems, agree on certain principles without the need for a common executive. Can the mainland accept that? I think they can. Why do I say that? If you look at Macau, Macau in the 16th century was given to the Portuguese. It was not taken from the Ming dynasty because China wanted the Portuguese to have their own area and don't trouble me. The Portuguese understood that. Never be a problem to China. The Qing dynasty renewed it. But in the 19th century, when China was being ravaged by the imperial powers, Portugal decided to take Macau. But they had a revolution in 1973. And they said, we want to return Macau immediately to China. What did China say? China said, no, we have to settle Hong Kong first. Please stay. So it was only in 1999 that Macau returned to the mainland. And even to today, there is no practical change in how Macau is run or the Macanese way of life. We do not know what China will be in 20 years' time. China today is very different from China 20 years ago. Unrecognizable of what China was 40 years ago. So 20 years from now, 40 years from now, what will China be? What will Taiwan be? So this, in my free moments, is something I play in my mind. The possibility of a Chinese Commonwealth where they come together. Where you maintain your links with America, but not to an extent which threatens China. Where you maintain your links to Singapore and other countries, where Xin Guang Pu Ping can still be in Taiwan with no problem. But as I said, the problem is the party constitution of DPP. Maybe it's possible. You can't change the constitution. It's too difficult. But maybe it is possible for the various political parties in Taiwan to add a preamble of what one China means to Taiwan. What does it mean to Taiwan? So you make your position clearer, and leave the mainland to do what it wants. But you make your position clearer. And this is to the advantage of Taiwanese people. Because if you are divided in Taiwan, your position is weakened. But if among the political parties there is broad consensus about the 九二共识, that it means for a prolonged period a Commonwealth, not a PRC, not an ROC, maybe by that time it's just called China, and you can apply this in Olympic Games and other international organizations, that there is a way forward. And I believe a little clarification on the Taiwan side will enable Taiwan to go back on the road, which was opened by Xi Jinping and Ma Ying-jeou in Singapore in 2015. It will only work if Taiwan is valuable to the mainland. What makes Taiwan valuable to the mainland? Why do Singaporeans and Hong Kongers and others like to visit Taiwan? It's a great physical beauty. The people are very cultured. The food is excellent. There is a common courtesy among young and old, even to foreigners. And there is a cosmopolitan feel to it. You're an American, a Japanese, you come to Taiwan, you feel, yes, you're comfortable. You may have some difficulty here and there, but basically it's an international society. You know, because Taiwan politically is in a very constrained position and getting more and more constricted, there is almost a psychological sublimation of Taiwan, which has enabled it to excel in other areas. I thought the other area where you have excelled is in semiconductors. You know, Vivek Ramaswamy, the Republican candidate, very clever, very eloquent. He said, no, we must get TSMC to go to the US. Then in 10 years, we don't need Taiwan anymore. We can give it to China. He doesn't understand that TSMC is not just factories and individuals. TSMC grew up in an ecosystem, in a Taiwanese ecosystem. It cannot be replicated in America. It cannot be fully replicated in China. It cannot be replicated in Singapore. Why is that? To begin with, you are a very educated population, smart people. I'm so honored that the K.T. Lee Foundation, K.T. Lee was the father of all this, laid the foundation. You couldn't have done it without your mainland connection. You couldn't have done it without the American connection, without the Japanese connection. All these are layers in Taiwan society, which makes you unique, special, and valuable to the mainland. Convergence as equals will only work if Taiwan continues to be of value to the mainland. This is how Singapore conducts relations with China. There was a period when China needed Singapore for many things. But we know that for those things, China no longer needs Singapore. So we must continue to have things which China wants, which it cannot develop for itself in Singapore, for us to be of continuing interest to China. And indeed, we do this for the entire world, that we only prosper by being of value, by contributing to the well-being of others. And this Taiwan must continue to do, and can continue to do, provided your young people, your smart people, remain in Taiwan, that even when they work overseas, in their hearts, they're still Taiwanese. But there's a lot that the mainland can learn from Taiwan. I mean, someone spoke about the healthcare system in Taiwan, about how people treat one another, about the respect for the environment. No, the hills here are so wonderfully cladded. In agriculture, Taiwan has done so much. No, the mainland has since caught up. But you've maintained an organic way of life, which if you can replicate, let us say, 70 times on the mainland, can you imagine what a remarkable place the mainland will be? If, to varying degrees, they're all a little like Taiwan on the mainland. You know, I've been to all those places, visited the same shrines, the same tombs and so on, the same museums. I said, yes, it is a common history. And how can there not be a common future? There'll only be a separate future if America makes it a separate future. And I think America will find it increasingly difficult to keep Taiwan separate from China. And therefore, the best outcome is convergence and peaceful reunification, not on the basis of the PRC and ROC, but on some future entity which we can call China. Thus, there must be ways to transcend the politics to achieve a higher unity, not by fighting to keep every last embassy or saying that, oh, I must be a member here or a member there. No, transcend it. And in transcending it, assert a moral quality which even the mainland will have to accept. But if it's just at the level of politics, Taiwan will be in a very weak position and will be in a weakening position.